Hi everyone, I'm Mathieu from Shapediver, and today I'll talk about the Speckle integration with Shapediver. And in particular, I'll talk about how to load and publish Speckle data to and from Shapediver apps. So if you're already familiar with Shapediver and Speckle, this is relatively straightforward, but there's a few things to pay attention to, so I'll insist on this point. So let's start with trying to load Speckle data inside a Shapediver app. Here I have a Speckle model already prepared with several pieces of geometry with different materials. And the first thing we need to do is to learn how to load this Speckle model inside Grasshopper. And for this, we use the Speckle connector, the version 3, the next gen connector. And I'll first show how, the standard way to load this data inside Grasshopper, and then how to adapt this so that it works on Shapediver. So typically, if you're trying to load this data, you would go to this models category in the Speckle connector, use the sign-in component to sign in your Speckle account. Here, if you click on sign in, you're going to be authorized. And now you're inside Grasshopper, and you can use the Speckle model component and reference the URL of one of your models. So let's say this is the one I want to load. I'll copy the link and connect it to the Speckle model component. And here I am. I have access to my model. Now that I have access, I can use the load and publish components to either load data or publish data to this Speckle model. In my case, I want to load it. So I'll add this component, and when I connect it, I have to click on the load button so it synchronizes the data with my Speckle model, and the data should come here in my Grasshopper environment. So this model is quite, this method is quite straightforward and simple, but it has a couple of issues that make it incompatible with Shapediver. The first one is that you need to sign in to your account, to authorize your account, which will not be possible on a remote server, right? And the second one is that both of these components are asynchronous, which means that when you connect them and disconnect them, the data doesn't automatically update. You have to click on this button here to load it. And that's also something you cannot do on a remote server, right? So we have to do it a bit differently, and thankfully the Speckle connector has all the components we need. So I'll just keep my model URL here and go to the dev category. And you can see here there's a Speckle model URL component that's a bit different. It also has the URL input here, but it has a second input which corresponds to an authorization token, right? Which is the token that's going to allow us to authenticate to your Speckle account, but without having to log in directly inside Grasshopper. So in order to generate this token, I'll go to my Speckle account here, and you can go to Settings, Developer, and here you'll see a list of access tokens. I already created some in my account. Actually, there's some leftovers here. So I will create a new one for the sake of this tutorial. I'll name it Shapediver token, for example. And what I need to do is to attach some permissions to this token, right? And in order to do what we want, which is load and publish data from Grasshopper to Speckle models, I need the profile read permission, so it can access my account, and the streams read and streams write permissions, right? So I can assign all these permissions and create the token. And you get this number, that's your token. And what you have to be careful about is that this number will never be given to you again. So you have to store it safely somewhere so that you don't forget it, right? But of course you have to store it securely, because this is not something you want to share. It gives pretty critical access to data in your Speckle account. In my case, we're going to use Shapediver feature, which is the secrets feature, which allows you to store precisely this type of sensitive data, also sensitive passwords, API keys, etc. In my case here, I stored the token as speckle token here, and you can see it here. And we'll see how I can access this token directly inside Grasshopper. So in Grasshopper here, as I mentioned, we could just copy this token, right, and connect it to the component. But the idea is that this is not a safe best practice in case your Grasshopper definition leaks, or if you want to share it with other people. This is not an information you want to share. So what you want to do instead is use the secret input component of the Shapediver plugin, which allows you to access this sensitive information that you stored in your Shapediver account, as I just showed, right? So if I right-click on this component here, I can here in the secret name have the list of secrets I stored in my account and select one that I can use to connect to the component. And here I have access to my model. And as a second step, I can now load data from this model. And to do this, I'll use the synchronous load component here in the dev category again, which solves the issue we saw with the asynchronous load component. That means that it has an additional input called run, and I can connect a Boolean toggle, for example, to this component that I use to decide when I want to load the information. So here I double click, I set load to true, and now the data is loaded again in my definition. Right, and all of this is parametric, there's no buttons, there's nothing. This is completely compatible with Shapediver, and you can put this model online. So now, before we are done with this example, I'll do a couple more things. I'll do two basic things with this data I loaded from Speckle. First, I'm gonna display it in the viewer, and second, I'll add an export. So I'll make this a way to load data from Speckle and export it in any format, for example. In my case, I'll just add a 3DM format here, but we could add any format compatible with Shapediver. Speckle example. Okay, so how do I do this? Well, to export the meshes here, I can access the objects using the Speckle object, Speckle geometry component here. Not yet. 1 second. So here's my collection, and I can query Speckle objects without a filter, so I get all the objects. And those objects are Speckle geometry, so I can also use this component here. And now what I can do is connect the meshes here, so I can export these meshes, right? So now I'm gonna have an export component exporting all the meshes as a 3DM file. And I can also use these meshes to display in the viewer. I can even do a bit more, because each of the meshes has a material attached to it, and what I can do is extract this material. I can exploit the material, deconstruct, and use, for example, here the diffuse color to assign a color to each object in my scene. I have to craft here, and now it works. All right, so now this model is almost ready. The last point is that here I have hard-coded the URL of my model, but I'd like to make a Shapediver app where I can reference any of my Speckle models. So I'll replace this hard-coded string with a text input, which will allow the users of my my app to enter any URL, right? So now I don't see anything because I don't have any data in my text input, but when I upload this definition, I get this very simple model with a couple of inputs here. So I can again go to my Speckle account, look at this model, copy link, and now I can here paste it, use my toggle to decide to load the data in the model. Here, the data is loaded. I can visualize it with all the materials, and I can also use the export asset here to export all the meshes as a 3DM file. All right, that's it for the load example. Now I'd like to quickly show how it works when one wants to publish to a speckle model. I have a different Grasshopper definition I prepared here with a very simple twisted tower with standard inputs here. And what I'd like is to make an app where people can configure this tower and then publish, variations of it to a speckle model. Here I already prepared the basic setup, the same one as we have for the load. So here I have an input to send the URL of the model. I have the secret input where I can send my token. And I have the speckle model URL component here to access my model. Again, I'm not sending data here, so for now this component does not do anything. But as soon as I upload this model, we'll see the results. So what's missing now is to decide what to do once I have access to my model and once I get the geometry corresponding to the parametric variation that I produced in the app. And the workflow is very similar to the publish workflow. What we have here is to use the synchronous publish component, right? So I'm gonna connect my model. Here I have some logic deciding what to do if the connection to the model was unsuccessful, etc. I'm building an app actually here using the app builder components. And I'm going to show some messages if it's successful or if it failed, and etc. But here, this is my speckle model, so I can connect it. And now I can also add a toggle here, trigger export, to decide when I want to publish to my speckle model. And now all I have to do is build a collection and send it to the publish component. So to build this collection, I use the create collection component. And in this collection, what I'll do is send some speckle geometry, just that. And the speckle geometry will be defined by the meshes I create here. Here I have two branches with the roofs and the facade. And I'll also do the same with materials. So I'll try to assign, I have here in my definition, I have two different set of materials for the roofs and the facade. So what I'll do is entwine those two colors in my definition to create two corresponding branches and create material. So the speckle geometry component is compatible with the create material component in Grasshopper. So I can create materials corresponding to my two branches. And now I'm sending all the correct data to the speckle model, right? So as long as I give the URL of model here, this definition will be able to publish to speckle. I can already show you what the publish model looks like. And here we can see the online app corresponding to my Grasshopper definition. We can see the layout I built with my app builder components. On the left, some geometry inputs that I can use to drive the geometry. And on the right, I have some text widget to give some instructions and also these error messages. For now, I have an error because I didn't specify a URL, but I'm going to do this now. Copy this link of this model here and establish a connection with it. Here, the connection was successful, so I can trigger the exports and publish to the speckle model. All right, so the export was successful. So I can go back to speckle and I can see that this new version was already published, which includes the material attributes I sent. I could also be sending other attributes. And I could, you know, produce another variation and publish a new version to the model. All right, so here I have my very small tower, and this new version should now be available very soon. Here we go. So that's it for today. That's all I wanted to talk about. We are working on some exciting other developments for this connection, including our webhook feature, which will allow to create automations from the Speckle platform without even having to leave it and go to an app. Just have an app work in the background and trigger automations when models are updated, for example, or created, etc. But for today, that's it. Thank you for listening, and see you next time.